Well, hello and welcome to another in our series of Choice Words videos where we get to meet the great and the good of UK fund selection, UK fund research. I'm Julian Marr, I'm Editorial Director at Wealthwise Media, and today I am delighted to be talking to Richard Philbin, who is Senior Investment Director at Hawksmoor Investment Management. Hello Rich, how are you?
I'm very well, Julian, good to see you again.
Thank you, that's very kind. Bodes well for the rest of this, doesn't it? Kick in with the usual first question. What excites you about the investment outlook, current investment outlook? What gives you pause for thought?
Go start with an easy one, shall we?
No, let's say yes. Just sit back.
The thing is, there's always got to be something that's going to excite you, because when you're investing, there's so many different asset classes, there's so many different geographies, there's so many different managers, there's so many different styles. What excites me is the fact that we've probably peaked on interest rates, so therefore, a falling interest rate generally means that things are likely to be better for companies and therefore profits and therefore stock markets. But I do fear there is the red flag flashing of potential recession around the corner, and one of the reasons why interest rates start to fall is because economies are slowing down. The world seems to be awash with a lot of very good ideas at the moment, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, we've seen a lot of them. The growth that has been achieved in markets has been driven by a very narrow number of stocks. And should those magnificent seven, which make up a huge chunk of the US and therefore a huge chunk of the world, if they start to roll over, I think that could scare people. And that obviously isn't good. But then one of the other things that really worries me is the uncertainty of the commander-in-chief in the US as to what he does, where he does it, and how he does it. So I guess, having done this job for decades, the thing that really excites me is the potential for active management coming to the fore again. The opportunity set to make returns over and above the index, because of the way that the index is comprised at the moment. Ultimately, I think there's some potential good times ahead.
God, we're only one question in. It's a roller coaster of emotions.
Absolutely.
So I went down a bit, I went down a bit.
But that's it, and that's what markets are.
Yeah.
If you knew where everything was going on a daily basis, it certainly wouldn't be fun.
Strap yourselves in, folks. Here we go. Question 2 then. Well, that was the macro, thinking big thoughts. Let's narrow in. What do you look for most in an individual investment? And you mentioned red flag. What stands out as a red flag for when you're looking at investments?
Okay. What we look for is consistency. And if I can find consistent funds and fund managers and fund manager approaches, then that to me is the best thing you can find. As I intimated in the last question, markets are up and down on a daily basis and you don't know where they're going to go. So if you can find a manager that has a clear path to where they want to go, that makes things much better. Now, they can have a clear path by having a 30 stock portfolio and no turnover, or they can have a 500 stock portfolio and a 100% turnover. It really doesn't matter as long as you understand what they do, why they do it, how they do it, and what's the likelihood of them being able to deliver tomorrow what they've delivered yesterday. Then that is the comfort factor that we look for. I tend to have a relatively low portfolio turnover in the way that we build portfolios, because we don't want to double guess what the managers are double guessing what's going to happen to the markets. Whereas if we can buy into that process and run with it for the medium to longer term, then I'm very happy. So I guess the red flag is the complete opposite of what I've just said. It's when you've sat down with managers and said, how have you achieved the returns? And they don't really know, or they've been lucky, or they might have a 50 stock portfolio, but all the attribution comes from a limited number, or they've got lucky on right sectors that they've just fallen into. So I much more work by exception reporting. When you've got tens of thousands of collective investments to look at, if you can find the ones that are consistent on a consistent basis, why do you need to bother looking at the others?
I was worried to ask the next question now, which is about the need for professional investors to look beyond so-called traditional, the world of alts. How you mentioned you've been around the industry a year or two? How you've seen things come and go. What do you feel about that at the moment?
I think it ultimately depends on what it is you're looking for when you're constructing a portfolio. Not only do we like to buy long-term or managers for the long term, we like to build strategic asset allocations rather than tactical. Obviously, you've got to be mindful of what's happening in the short term to try and get there. But we tend to take a longer term view and then tilt as we move into different economic scenarios. The great thing about alts, and we do use alts, is the diversification benefits. You know me a very long time, and you know that I like to talk about football. You know, you can consider a goalkeeper a footballer, but a goalkeeper does a very different job than an attacker. Correspondingly, you shouldn't put 11 goalkeepers on the pitch, and you shouldn't put 11 attackers on the pitch. So to me, alts can add value, but it's when you use them and how you use them. The due diligence you've got to do is slightly different on an alts manager, because what they're trying to achieve tends to be quite different to your traditional equity bonds within that. Now, whether you consider property alts, or whether you consider commodities alts, or whether you consider absolute return alts, or how you treat all of that, private equity, private debt, so on and so forth, that makes it a little bit more complex. But ultimately, if you can find something that can achieve part of your desired outcome and do it in a lowly correlated or more diversified way, which allows you to add a bit of blend into your portfolio, then I'm all for it.
Top football analogy as well, which leads neatly into our next question, which is about how you approach communicating with clients. Is it entirely football based? And also, do you set a premium on the idea of the right type of client, that there is someone, how do you make sure that you bring a client on board for the whole journey so they don't miss out on the good stuff at the beginning and the good stuff at the end?
That's an awful lot of questions there in one.
Usually I normally ask about 6 questions in each one, but yeah, bear with it.
The part of the business at Hawksmoor that I work within is called the solutions business. And we like to think within the solutions business that we're working in wealth management 2.0, not 1.0. In essence, what we're running is bespoke model portfolios, but for individual clients. Where if I consider wealth management 1.0, which is building model portfolios, that would be where we dictate the number of holdings. We dictate what cautious looks like, what balance looks like, what an income level is. We dictate which platforms we are offering our services on. We dictate what the benchmark is, and many other factors. Within the solutions business, we consider it as wealth management 2.0, because we work with the advisor, because they can tell us what they think balance looks like. They can tell us what exposure they want us to have with regards to active versus passive, for instance, or ESG, or we want no more than 10% in an individual holding, and various factors like that. So this is part and parcel of the initial service we offer. So we're bringing the clients on board with this actually in mind, and therefore we're bringing them on the journey from day one. They realise that they need to change their centralised investment proposition or their business model, and they want to work with us, partner with us, have a joint venture with us in essence, and therefore we can tell them this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it, but they can say, well, yeah, but you've got to do it along these ways. So in essence, we sit down together with a blank piece of paper and say what works, what doesn't work, how do we do this, how do we not do this. And because of that, it allows you to be on that same page from day one. Now, I know you've asked me lots of questions. I've completely forgotten what the other ones were.
No, I thought that was pretty good, actually. I was asking about the communicating with clients, making sure they stick along with for the ride, I suppose, is the second one.
And then we because the solution we call bespoke model portfolios. We have, some clients want much more frequent contact. Some clients want, annual or half yearly, or some of them, we're on the phone to them on a regular basis. We're on email. Communication is a part and parcel of that blank sheet. You know, how often do you want us to communicate with you? How often do you want us to tell you what we're doing, or is it, you know, leave it as a surprise? But one thing that we also do is that everything that we do with our clients is we put everything on the cloud. So and they're, you know, password protected, and they can go in and see exactly what we're doing with them and for them. If there are, we will be both reactive and proactive.
Very good. All bases covered. More personal question now. I was about to laugh and say if you can remember that far back, but then I suddenly realised like, actually that's having a go at how long I've been around as well. So let's not that. What was your path into investment? And if you hadn't taken it, what do you think you'd be doing now?
My path to investment was, I'm sure sad is probably the right word, but my father's uncle was an investment manager in New York. And in November '87, my granddad died, and my father's uncle came over for the funeral. And I realised just how wealthy he was, and I thought, that sounds interesting. How do I do that? And this was not long after the '87 crash. And I said to him, you know, it must be, you know, bad out on Wall Street and this and that. And he said to me, well, there are still 100,000 IBM shares going through the market every single day. Yeah, when things are going up or going down, there's still opportunities. He said, every day's a challenge, every day's new, every day's different. And I guess having a skittish brain, I thought, that sounds like a job for me. So sadly, I went to university to do a degree in financial services. I graduated from Bristol with a degree in financial services in 1994, and
I didn't know such a thing existed back then.
Yeah, well, it was only the second or third year that they'd actually ran the course, and I was one of the few people on the degree as well that actually applied for the degree rather than got in there through clearing because they wanted to do a general business management degree. So yeah, sad probably is that word, and that's what I wanted to do.
Well, it's had a number of dying grandfathers and all the rest of it, or they, you know, but it worked out, yeah. Happy ending end. It sounds like it was always meant to be, but then if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
What would I be doing? Well, at 6'3", I'm too tall to be an F1 driver. I've got 2 right feet because I'm left-footed, so I'm not good enough to be a footballer. I'm too fat, too slow, too old. Don't know how to tackle.
Oh, you're making me sad again. Should we just take the win with financial services?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to write. I like to read. Yeah. So maybe something, you know, author, journalist, that sort of thing, possibly.
You know, everyone says that. Yeah, I just make it look easy.
Well, you do, absolutely. I've known you for far too long, Julian, and you know, a hero.
Yeah. Hero today, gone tomorrow. So segue onto investment mistakes now, but what's the biggest investment mistake you're prepared to admit to, and what did you learn from it?
The biggest investment mistake, professionally or personally?
I think for the benefits of regulation, maybe professionally.
Biggest investment mistake. I generally think it would be holding on to things longer than you should have when your thesis hasn't played out, but you still think that you've made the right decision, but you know, either the market goes against you or the views change or something happens, and I think it's probably holding on to things longer than possibly you should. And what have I learned from it? I think it's sometimes to act on the gut feel. Sometimes it's to put your hands up and say, yes, I made a mistake. But then I also think that when you look at the hit rates of winners, you don't have to be in the 70s, 80s, 90%. I read a really fascinating thing not so long ago from actually a guy who I used to work with, Stuart Widdowson, who runs Odyssean Investment Trust. And he was saying that Roger Federer, and I'm sure you've all heard these stats, won 80% of his matches, but only won 56% of his points or something. And it's like you've only got to be a little bit better, but do it on a much more consistent basis, and you will You might lose the battle, but you win the war. And if you can continue to do that, you'll do very, very well. So I think selfishly, it's holding on to things longer than possibly you should, and learning from it and going, everyone does make mistakes and can make mistakes. But the trouble is, it's always the fear of what happens if I sell it and it comes back and it goes on to prove, unfortunately, we all live in that world, don't we?
What do you see as the best and worst case scenarios for the future of UK wealth? I love that. So that's these questions. I think there's 4 times you've just gone, oh,
goodness me.
Who writes these questions?
For the future of UK wealth to do well, I think we need less compliance, less regulation, more buyer beware, more incentives, and an economy which welcomes innovation and challenge and the okayness to fail, rather than there be too many close the door every time something. There is nothing wrong. Nothing wrong in failing. When I was growing up, I used to ride horses, and there's a saying, 49 falls makes a rider. And it's like, you can fall off and get back on, but the idea is you get back on and you do it again. And I think because money is such an emotive subject and it means so much more. I mean, there's the joke, isn't there, the guy that's, that can't remember his second wife's name, but he remembers exactly how much he paid her in the divorce. Because that, I think, is one of those horrible scenarios where you can make mistakes. Apart from buying a house and making an investment, everyone is happy to lose money on everything else that they purchase. But there seems to be that you're not allowed to make losses, or your investments, none of them go south. Well, of course they do, because that's what capitalism is. It is the levelling out of value versus of risk taken. So I personally think that regulation needs to free up a bit, that you can carry losses forward, that you are allowed to take risks. And there's so much in what we do which is subjective. Your definition of risk or your definition of balance might be different to mine. I have a saying, if the answer's 7, what's the question? And you could say it's 6 plus 1 and you'd be right. And I could say I'm 8 minus 1 and I'm right. And we've both got to the same answer. So to go down a measured route of this is the way that you invest and this is low risk, this is high risk, is quite silly. If we look back at the wonderful scenario of Truss and Kwarteng, the gilt market was more volatile than the crypto market. How do you define risk there? Gilts are meant to be the lowest risk asset, or along with cash, but there's times when they're not. And you just have to accept it and roll with it.
Good stuff. Very neat too, because I think the worst case scenario is that we just carry on heading the same way, overly regulation, everything else. I'll answer that one for you. What advice would you have given yourself on your first day in work? Would like to have given yourself?
What would I give it? Read. Listen. Don't be afraid to take risk. Don't be afraid to ask questions. As I say, I've been doing this job for more than 30 years, and every day's a school day. I see managers constantly. I speak to clients constantly. I speak to colleagues constantly, and every day you learn something new. Don't think that you know it all. Don't think that you will ever know it all, but constantly strive to do better. The other thing I'd suggest is you take an awful lot of notes and you revert back to those notes, because the factor that was driving the market only 3 months ago is different to what it is today. Conversations with fund managers is great, but if you're not writing those notes down and you're not thinking about it, you'll forget 3 months later that great line that someone said, and we live in a world where data is free, and you've got yeah. So data is free. You can put as much charts and graphs and video and whatever onto a website, and it doesn't cost anything, and therefore you can refer back to it and every now and then, if you've written it down, you can remember, I spoke to Julian, so type in Julian Marr, and then you've got all your references back there. That sort of in-house library or database for you is brilliant, and you will always go back and refer to it and think, things were different back then, or actually they weren't different back then, and these are the scenarios that I can drive forward with accordingly.
Very good. Last question, we call this choice words because your professional choices you make, but now let's have some personal ones. 2 personal recommendations. One's a book, doesn't have to be investment. One is a free hit.
The book, I would suggest 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. I mean, it's a good few years old now, but a really fascinating insight into technology investing. And taking risks and private equity and Silicon Valley and all of that. Still an awful lot of things from there. I mean, I've read it a few times now, and I do refer back to it as to there's some really interesting points within that. It's a good read. I do like to read, as I've intimated earlier. And a free hit. Don't get bogged down in work. Yes, by all means, do more than your 40 hours a week if you need to, but don't forget there's the world outside of work. There is family, there is friends, there is the pub, there is the golf course, there is the mountain to ski on, there is the beach, and embrace everything. It takes a long time to build a career. But it's generally, your kids are with you forever, your family's with you forever, and they certainly can and do mean an awful lot to you.
Richard Philbin, life coach. There we go. Rich, love, money, work-life balance. Great choices, good advice. Richard, thank you so much for coming on Choice Words.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for the invite.
And thank you very much for watching. Do look out for further episodes as they are published.